Hello, dear ones. Father Peter John, coming to you from All Saints Orthodox Church in Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is in our midst. Today we celebrate our father among the saints, Isaac the Syrian. He was born in present-day Qatar or Qatar on the Persian Gulf, depending on how you pronounce it. He became a monk at a young age and lived there for a time until he eventually made his way to what is present-day Iraq. He lived as a solitary. You can see here that the book that he's writing in says, above all else loves silence. So he loved the solitary life. He loved being in stillness and practicing the presence of God in that stillness. Except for at some point he was actually elected Bishop of Nineveh. That lasted for 5 months. And then he asked for and received the blessing to return to the solitary life. He made his way south of Nineveh and lived there in the mountains until such a time as his health would no longer permit. He suffered, among other things, increased blindness. And so he retired to a monastery where he ended this life in the late 7th century. Now, St. Isaac is famous for many writings. I think the most famous work of his is called the Ascetical Homilies of St. Isaac the Syrian, in which he lays out the kind of the framework for how to live an ascetical life in Christ, how to deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow Christ. But it's a famous work. It was translated at the Marsaba Monastery in the Judean desert by a couple of monks there from Arabic into Greek, and then made its way throughout the entire empire, and of course just became kind of, if you will, an overnight sensation among Christians, especially ascetic-loving Christians and monastics. I just want to read you one of his writings, an excerpt of one of his writings about the world. He says, "The world," in quotes, "is the general name for all of the passions," the collective name. When we wish to call the passions by a common name, we call them the world. But when we wish to distinguish them by their special or specific names, we call them the passions. The passions are the following: love of riches, desire for possessions, bodily pleasure from which comes sexual passion, love of honor which gives rise to envy, lust for power, arrogance and pride of position, the craving to adorn oneself with luxurious clothes and vain ornaments, the itch for human glory, which is a source of rancor and resentment, and physical fear. These are the passions. Where these passions cease to be active, there the world is dead. Someone has said of the saints that while alive, they were dead. For though living in the flesh, they did not live for the flesh. See for which of these passions you are alive, he writes. Then you will know how far you are alive to the world and how far you are dead to it. May we all, through the prayers of St. Isaac the Syrian, draw ever closer to being dead to the world, to being dead to the passions of the flesh, to being truly alive in Christ and alive for Christ. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be.